Welcome to this Masterclass Explainer. Today, we're taking a highly formal, rigorous deep dive into one of the most widely cited metrics in global economics, real gross domestic product. For decades, we've all been heavily conditioned to view GDP as the ultimate proxy for social welfare. The logic seems pretty straightforward, right? If a nation's total output is growing, its people must be thriving. But as we unpack the advanced grade 12 ISC standard macroeconomic principles today, we are going to uncover exactly why that aggregate assumption is fundamentally flawed. To dismantle this, our cognitive roadmap for today will systematically cover 6 key limitations. We'll look at the distribution of income, the composition of output, the manner of increase, expenditure on regrettable necessities, monetization failures, and finally, the crucial omissions from raw GDP. Let's jump right in. Starting with limitation number 1, the distribution of income, or what we formally identify in macroeconomics as the inequality mask. When you look at a growing GDP, you're essentially looking at an expanding national income pie. But here's the catch. Raw macroeconomics rarely asks who actually gets to eat that pie. Rising GDP is completely silent on the issue of equitable distribution. Imagine a scenario where a nation's GDP literally skyrockets, but 75% of those economic gains are concentrated entirely within the top percentile of earners. The middle deciles just scrape by with 20%, and the bottom deciles are left with a mere 5%. Now, the raw data will proudly declare a massive economic boom. That's your accounting reality, a surging aggregate that looks absolutely fantastic on a national balance sheet. But the welfare reality? It's starkly different. Because the gains are entirely concentrated at the top, average household living standards remain completely stagnant. In some cases, they might even diminish due to inflation. So a rising GDP is actually a terrible standalone indicator for average social welfare. Moving on to our second structural limitation, the composition of output and the inherent production fallacy. See, GDP counts literally every transaction as a net positive. Production jumps driven by massive government spending on military defense armaments, or even the rapid manufacturing of toxic and harmful goods, will drastically inflate raw GDP. But we have to ask ourselves, do more tanks, missiles, or harmful chemicals equate to higher social welfare when compared to essential consumer goods like healthy food or accessible healthcare? Raw GDP treats $1 million spent on armaments exactly the same as $1 million spent on building a hospital. Equating raw production volume with well-being is a deep, deep production fallacy. Which brings us to our third syllabus headpoint, the manner of increase, and the hidden systemic costs of eroding long-term capital. Just as we have to ask what is produced, we absolutely must ask how it's produced. Picture year 1, an economy forces excessive working hours on its labor force and aggressively degrades its environmental assets. We're talking clear-cutting forests, depleting water tables, and just completely ignoring emissions. Now, this exploitive strategy results in a highly celebrated but temporary spike in national output by year 2. The GDP looks phenomenal, but fast forward to year 10, and we witness a severe erosion of long-term capital. The workforce is burned out, and the natural resources are completely barren. Degrading environmental assets creates this temporary GDP illusion while effectively destroying long-term welfare. Next up is limitation 4, regrettable necessities, which traps us in a false sense of macroeconomic growth. The precise ISC standard terminology you need to know here is defensive outlays. These are mandatory societal expenditures. Think expanding police forces to fight rising crime, funding military protection, or spending billions on massive pollution cleanup efforts. And here's the crazy part. All that money heavily inflates raw GDP. However, these expenditures do not represent a net gain in human welfare. They simply cover the cost of returning society back to its baseline state of safety or cleanliness. Let's put that into perspective. A healthy, clean economy might have a highly stable GDP and actualized high welfare, but a polluted economy, one plagued by environmental disasters, will actually show an inflated GDP because of those massive cleanup costs. On paper, the polluted economy appears wealthier, but the actual welfare change is zero. It is merely restored to the baseline. We are spending immense capital just to fix problems, and the GDP metric blindly counts it as economic progress. Limitation 5 highlights a structural flaw that's particularly relevant to developing countries: monetization failures. By definition, GDP is strictly a measure of monetized formal market transactions. If currency doesn't change hands in a recognized market, the formal macroeconomic system is fundamentally blind to it. This means large, non-monetized parallel sectors are entirely left off the ledger. Consider unrecorded subsistence farming, where families grow and consume their own food. Or think about informal barter exchanges, trading services directly with neighbors without any currency involved. Then there are the vast shadow economy transactions. Because all of these lack formal receipts, their immense contribution to human survival and daily welfare is treated by GDP as if it literally does not exist. That is a massive underestimation of true economic activity.
Finally, our sixth head point, omissions from raw GDP and the crucial missing variables.
We have to rigorously deconstruct what the aggregate ignores completely. First, the intrinsic value of leisure hours. If everyone works 80 hours a week instead of 40, GDP goes up, for sure, but overall welfare plummets. GDP assigns zero value to rest. Second, essential non-market household care. The monumental labor of raising children, caring for the elderly, or maintaining a household is entirely uncounted if it's done by family members. And third, overall quality of life indices. Things like political freedom, clean air, mental health. GDP completely, utterly ignores them. So we're left with a really stark contrast. Mathematical aggregates provide a strict, inflexible accounting of monetized transactions, while qualitative socioeconomic realities measure true, unquantifiable human flourishing. GDP is an incredibly useful tool for measuring the velocity of money and output, absolutely. But it is dangerously inadequate as a mirror for society's soul. I want to leave you with a highly academic, provocative thought that should really reframe how you view every piece of economic news from here on out. If our ultimate objective in macroeconomics is maximum human welfare, can we afford to let a rigid accounting aggregate dictate our global policy? Thank you for joining this Masterclass Explainer. Keep questioning the data.